Hello and welcome to the official podcast of Palate Exposure, featuring Ilona Thompson, a podcast for those seeking the ultimate in wine, food, and travel. Each week she interviews winemakers, chefs, celebrities, and a variety of guests that shape the way we enjoy life.
Hello, this is Ilona Thompson, Palate Exposure. I'm coming to you this afternoon with Jason Moore, who is a founding partner and owner of a winery in Napa Valley called Modus Operandi. We'll start by talking to Jason about his background, where he's from. I happen to know you're from Dallas, but let's start there. First of all, where did you grow up in Texas? Is it Dallas?
Yep, Dallas, Texas. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where the story starts. When I was like 17 years old or so, I started working in fine dining restaurants. So that's where I had my first true interaction with wine. My parents didn't want to drink wine too much when I was a kid, so it wasn't really part of my dinner table. But working in the restaurants and having that access to like the sommeliers and the wine managers and whatnot, they saw that I was interested, so they kind of really brought me into their world and exposed me to the wines that they were tasting and trying, on a daily basis. So it was awesome. I mean, I was trying some of the best wines on the planet. I mean, first growth Bordeaux, grower champagnes, important Italian wines, Napa Cult cabs. I mean, everything. So it was great. So I feel like with all that exposure, a pretty well developed palate, starting off at a pretty young age, and that interest in wine just really evolved into a passion for it. So when I was 21 years old, I got my real estate license. Did that for about a year or so. And after about a year, my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, Angelica, she kind of helped me realize that she goes, "Look, I know you think that real estate's your thing, but it's pretty obvious that it's not, because you're pretty bad at that." So brutal honesty from her as always. But anyways, she's like, you need to figure out what you're passionate about and try to create a career with that. So we kicked around some ideas, and she was like, "Well, how about wine? I've always loved wine." And literally that was like the epiphany moment, light bulb went off, and I was like, holy shit, I want to be a winemaker. And so of course that's a pretty lofty aspiration for a kid from Texas with no roots in the industry, no family out here to help, and no money to do it with. We're a very blue collar family back in Texas. My dad was a carpenter his entire career, so very much like a tradesman. So anyway, I'd say about 6 months later, she and I had like a 3-week-long garage sale, sold everything that we owned, and moved to California to pursue the dream of me becoming a winemaker and, owning my own brand. So that was pretty crazy.
So you were working in restaurants to really support yourself. It wasn't, a profession you were really looking to pursue as a sommelier or anything like that. This really was strictly a means to an end.
Yep.
You obviously had a very supportive girlfriend, so we need to give her a shout out. She deserves a lot of credit. Most women go, huh?
Yeah. Still with me.
That's fantastic. Congratulations on that. So you said that you got an opportunity to taste quite a few, what sounds like very illustrious wines, and somehow very early on, it calibrated your palate. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, I come from a pretty rough area in South Dallas, so wine just really wasn't, it wasn't
on the radar.
It wasn't even on the radar at all. When I started, I basically moved up to North Dallas, like a pretty, much more nice area, I guess you'd say, of Dallas, and working in the restaurants up there, and just like I said, having really never experienced wine, and then tasting the differences, that I was tasting, and from the different regions of the world and different producers, it was just like, wow, like this mind-blowing, revelation of how crazy and unique and special wines can be from all over the world. So yeah, it was cool.
What you're describing is high emotional value because being in your profession at the time, expensive wines probably meant good tips. So there's a practical side to it. But the way you're describing it, it's almost like you were falling in love. There's a romance to it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because like I've literally been in this room and completely by myself, watching TV or whatever, drinking a bottle of one of the a wine that I made, and I almost sound corny, but almost like get emotional and come to tears. Like I I freaking made this, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's, you know, you don't want to be that guy that's over complimentary of his own craft or product or whatever, but like, you know, there's a lot goes into making a bottle of wine. You know, it's not like a plate of food where, you know, you go in the kitchen and you start cooking, and 20 minutes, 30 minutes later, you have a plate of food you can consume and critique and judge and rate or whatever. With wine, man, it takes years and thousands of decisions, whether they're conscious or not, to get to the point of putting that wine in, you know, putting the cork in the bottle, you know?
Yeah.
So to like come back to that wine sometimes years later and drink it and taste it and really immerse yourself in that wine in that moment, it's like it's a really, sometimes a really cool experience, you know? Sometimes it's not, but sometimes it's just I get blown away. Like last night I popped a 3 liter of my 2012 cab for a buddy's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I haven't had that wine in probably 3 years myself. It's been a while, and couldn't have been more proud of that wine. So yeah, it's like people say, oh, you know, what's your favorite wine you've ever made or whatever, and it's hard to say because, again, kind of corny. It's like these are all our children, right? Like we made them, we birthed them, we raised them, and all that.
Excuse me.
So but yeah, I guess it is corny sometimes, you know. And that's okay.
Well, wine is a medium that has extraordinary capacity and at times powers. It's really a conduit to the outside world, but also often to ourselves, which, you know, is the type of valuable quality that you just don't come across in other mediums and other beverages. So there you were, 21, barely old enough to drink.
Mm-hmm.
You packed everything up.
Yep.
And moved to California. Where did you land?
Davis.
Ah, well.
So I moved. Yeah, we moved to Davis. The idea was that I'd go to UC Davis for
going to school. Yeah,
you know, enology and
sense.
viticulture. I actually lived there for 4 years, and after about 3 or 4 months of me living there, and you know, kind of being the creepy guy that walked the halls of Davis before I even was a student, just you know, I wanted to meet people and kind of make friends in in that particular department, you know, so I could, you know, be part of the community, really. Anyway, yeah, I'd say about after 3 or 4 months of me living there and talking with those people, and what I learned from talking to them is that Davis is not a good fit for me personally. You know, it was at the time, it's probably different now. At the time, it was very much more theory-based, I guess you'd say, you know, so I could tell that there wasn't a whole lot of actual winemaking going on. It's more, you know, research projects and things like that. You know, there's the core curriculum, and just kind of, I feel like I'm a lot like my dad, you know, very much more of a tradesman than an academic or whatever. I mean, I'm sure I would have done fine, but I just know my learning style, learned better by doing stuff versus, you know, wearing a lab coat, drawing molecules, and doing research projects. I mean, that just would have been a bad fit for me.
Where did that proactive side of you come from? Because, you know, most people would not do what you did. They wouldn't go out and seek information as you have.
I don't know. You know, my dad was pretty, you know, kind of a hands-off guy, you know. So I feel like things that I wanted to know, things I wanted to do, I had to kind of arrange myself in a way, you know. I mean, nothing against him. Like he was fine and all. He just wasn't super hands-on. The guy worked his ass off. I mean, he was always working, you know. God bless him. He had to, because we were dirt poor, you know. But I don't know. I mean, I'm totally kind of self-taught in all things that I do. I mean, do digital marketing stuff and some programming and that kind of computer stuff, and I didn't go to school for that either. I just kind of like learned it because I wanted to know it, you know. And I feel like I get annoyed by people who, you know, will say like, oh, I don't know how to do that or whatever. And I'm like, well, if you want to know how to do something, there's so much information at your fingertips anytime. We got Google, YouTube, all this stuff. I mean, that's for me a lazy excuse. And I don't want I don't want a YouTube certified surgeon doing surgery on me, that's for sure. But there's a lot of other things you can get away with self-taught kind of knowledge. So yeah.
Okay, so 21, landed in Davis, decided that UC Davis is not a pathway, clearly needed a job, started working in restaurants again, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was actually I had a really good resume leaving Dallas. I mean, I could pretty much work wherever I wanted there because my resume was stacked.
Very good.
Thing is, like, come to a different state and you hand that resume to people out here and they're like, I don't know what these restaurants are or if they're worth a shit or not, so didn't do me any favors here. And it was rough, man. Like when we first moved when we landed in Davis, we had like a couple of $1,000s. I mean, it was actually, I'll go backwards a little bit. We almost didn't come here because, like, my last night in Dallas, I was literally, getting ready to go to work, my last shift. I said to my wife, I was like, baby, I don't know, I just checked the account, we only have a couple grand in there and we're about to move halfway across the country and start a whole new life. Like, I don't know, maybe we should put this on hold for a while, and try to build up some cash. She's like, well, we'll talk about it when you get back tonight, She goes, I kind of agree, but we'll see. So anyway, I go to work, and long story short, one of the others, I was in the kitchen about to run food out to one of my tables, and one of the other servers came over to me and was like, dude, you're like the luckiest waiter in Dallas right now. And I was like, oh, really? Why? He goes, oh, you'll see. So apparently the table he was supposed to get didn't like the table, so they wanted to sit in my section, not for me, but because my table was, I guess, more attractive to them or something, I don't know. Anyway, lucky me, these people, I mean, right off the bat, Le Flave, Chevalier Montrachet, Le Pen, 82, Petrus, Mouton, I mean, and all classic vintage stuff. So, I mean, the bill was massive, just the wine bill alone. And the guy tipped on the wine. So long, I literally walked out after tipping out like a boss with like $2,400 cash. I never made that much money in one day of working in a restaurant ever, right?
I think even these days it's a hefty amount, let alone 20 years ago.
So to me, that was kind of like, it's like God was saying, listen, Jason, I know you're worried, I know you're stressed, I know you're second guessing this move, but let me make it real clear. Here's a clear hint of like what you should do.
Talk about serendipity.
Go ahead and do it, So that was awesome. But yeah, when we got to Davis, I didn't have any kind of job lined up or anything like that. And so as the money ran out, I always kind of wear the financial stress, I so that my wife doesn't have to feel it. So, I mean, it got so bad that I would put on my uniform to go to work, and I would give my wife a hug and kiss bye, and I'd leave, but I didn't even have a job, Oh
my God.
I was pretending to have a job so that she wouldn't worry, but what I would do is I would go to the local bookstore and look through the local lifestyle magazines to try to find high-end restaurants that I could send my resume to try to get a job. And I was like making calls and trying to get hired. So I'd come back home about 4 hours later and just be like, babe, I was first in, it was dead, and I didn't get any tables, so I didn't make any money. Sorry, and it was awful. It was terrible. It was so hard.
Which year was that?
It was 2002. Yeah.
So I met you at La Toque.
Right.
Roughly, I want to say 20 years ago.
Well, it was, no, it wasn't that long ago. I worked at La Toque from 2003 to 2006.
So how did you get that job?
Well, I finally got work in Sacramento, so I was working out there. And then at one point I was just like, I told my wife, like, I need to go work in Napa if I'm going to, be in that community and, start my wine career. Mm-hmm. At some point I need to actually be in Napa because I'm not going to Davis. There's no reason for me to really be here. Anyway, was working at Bricks originally. That was the first restaurant I got hired at in Napa, and that was cool. I made actually better money there than I did at La Toque.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, it was just volume, you know.
Yeah, it used to be a really busy restaurant.
Yeah, and it was cool. I remember a night I was working there. I waited on Aaron Jordan, you know, and I was like, I recognized him. I was like, oh, yeah, it's Aaron Jordan, you know. You know, these winemakers for me are kind of like, you know, sports heroes and stuff, you know. So
yeah, I can understand that.
when I see these guys, I get excited and whatever. And it's funny because I was making a batch of wine in my closet in Davis in a basically like a small trash can essentially, and I would, you know, go there and punch it down and check the bricks and sugars and all that stuff like every day, and it started stinking. You know, it had this like reductive smell, and so, you know, I didn't wait on Aaron, but I recognized him, and I went and I you know, basically, sorry for interrupting your meal, but I know who you are, and I'm making some wine in my closet. Do you mind if I ask you a question? I have a problem with this fermentation. And he was so cool. He was like, yeah, absolutely, man. What's up? You know, so I told him, like, yeah, hey, I got this. It really smells like, you know, rotten eggs and like sulfur and this and that, or you know, whatever. So he goes, yeah, it just sounds like it's reductive, you know. And so he goes, here's what I would do. He goes, get yourself a 5-gallon bucket, drill a bunch of holes in it all over, and then take that bucket and push it down into the cap, and let wine fill up through the holes, and then pull it out and let the wine cascade back into your fermenter. And he goes, you're aerating it, and it sounds like it needs some air, it needs some oxygen, because it's gotten reductive. And so I was like, cool, man. So I went home, and I mean, I couldn't wait to get home to go do it. Yeah, macro, yeah.
Macro ox, yeah.
So I went and did it, and it totally worked, you know.
That's
so it's just
cool.
like, that was one of my first lessons in winemaking, was in my closet in Davis, you know, and it was at the advice from Aaron Jordan, which is pretty cool.
That's a great story. So you lived in Davis, you first commuted to Sacramento, which made logical sense, and then you again made a bold decision.
Yep. To
go work in Napa. The commute had to have been, you know, pretty brutal, especially late hours, restaurant hours. So you really sacrificed.
Yeah. So like when I took the job at La Toque, definitely was a pay cut, a little bit further of a drive. You know, and so again, working in Napa, living in Davis, I drove almost every day for 4 years. I put like, I don't know, probably 250,000 miles on my poor little Honda Civic that we had originally, that we drove out here with. Yep. That was a lot. And it did suck. I mean, you know, starting the brand in 2004, so I had my winery going while I was working at La Toque, right? And then in 2005, I did an internship at Viadere up on Howell Mountain. Okay. So I was living in Davis, making my wine at Bell Wine Cellars in Yountville, doing a harvest intern at Viadere, and working at La Toque, which is like, you know, you're right, the hours are terrible, right? So we'd go in at like 3:30 or so, and sometimes we wouldn't get off until 12:30, 1:30 in the morning, and I had to drive back to Davis, and then be back to Viadere at like, you know, 5:30 in the morning. So it's like, yeah, if I do that, I'll pretty much die, because I'll fall asleep at the wheel on Highway 80.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You know, I mean, I was exhausted. I had just shy of a mental breakdown in that year, because I was just like, I had nothing left. I mean, I was burning the candle at both ends, and I was exhausted. So anyway, you know, Julia Wilson, she was the manager there at La Toque at the time, she was such a sweetheart. You know, she's like, she could tell I was stressing out about my wines that I was making. Sure. And she could see that I was exhausted, so, you know, she was like, you need to go home and get some rest and come back when you're rested. So
what attracted you to La Toque? Was it Scott Tracy mentorship? I mean, they had a fabulous wine list, like probably the best in the valley at the time, maybe shy of French Laundry.
Yeah. It definitely wasn't Scott. I actually did not like Scott at first.
Oh, is that right?
No,
okay.
Didn't like him, because he was just Scott would see people come and go because a lot of people couldn't cut it there, right?
Yep.
To answer your question, I liked Latoque better. It was a better fit for me because it was the kind of service that I was accustomed to giving.
Yep.
I don't like turn and burn. I like to, do elevated, nice service, like professional service. I took a lot of pride in. I was a waiter? Okay, yeah, but I took a lot of pride in what I did, and I really enjoyed executing, perfect service to the best of my ability. Everything proper. Everything's just right.
That's really admirable. This is a profession that unfortunately is not practiced to that degree of integrity as much anymore, at least not in California. Can't speak for Texas, but in my dining experience, at that level of awareness and, like you said, taking pride in your work, that's really interesting to hear.
So Scott was he, I guess because he saw people come and go, he assumed I would be another one of them, I suppose. So he wasn't too nice to me.
Oh, okay.
I guess you don't want to get attached to people if they're gonna not make it and either quit or get fired quickly or whatever. So he was just kind of he was a bit of a dick a little bit. Scott's a very unique person. If you know him, you know what I'm talking about. So I would ask the other people there, I was like, do I need to get along with this guy? Because I freaking hate him right now. Like, is it important for me to get along with him? And they were like, yep, you pretty much need to get along with that guy. If you're going to work here, he needs to like you. So I was like, okay, how do I do that? How do I get him to like me? They're like, help him in every way that you can. If you see him carrying plates, take them out of his hand. If you see that he needs glassware on a table, get there before he does. Do whatever you can to help him because he's the busiest guy in this restaurant. Like, hands down, he did all the pairings, as you know. He personally told stories about every single wine to every guest between each of their 5 courses. So he touched every single table in that restaurant, 5 times a night. It's insane the amount of work that guy had on his plate. We just had our section, a quarter of the restaurant or a third of the restaurant, whatever. He had the whole restaurant. So anyway, I did what they said. I helped him out as much as I could, and he became to like me. And ultimately he came to like me enough that when he opened his winery, he hired me to be his winemaker.
That's really cool.
So it's kind of crazy how things change.
That's a Gentleman Farmer brand, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he still is an icon.
Yep.
So it must have been a really gratifying part eventually when you ironed out the relationship to really just watch him, and what he does. And he's a consummate storyteller. And he was that way before, the hoopla that populates the wine world today. He really was a very impassioned, authentic storyteller.
Yeah. People ask him, or they did, I don't know if anymore, but like, why he didn't go the route to be a master somm or whatever.
Yeah.
And he just, I don't know, he knew he didn't need that to do what he did, and I don't know, maybe that would even be a distraction for him. I don't know. He's a different kind of guy. He's unique for sure.
Oh, I wish I was more like him.
Yeah.
So what happened after Latoque? You were making wine in your closet, and I know there's a story subsequently that involves a man named Tom in his garage.
Right.
So how do we get to that?
Yeah. So so me and some of the guys, at the restaurant, they knew I moved here to be a winemaker. No, this is before I got anything started. Actually, this is like, at the first restaurant I ever worked, so I was still living in Davis, and hadn't started the brand, obviously. So anyway, we go on these wine tasting field trips, just to have fun, learn, whatever. And we went to Amazetta, and my buddy
Begelhoff.
Yeah, Bob was there. Gus Caleris was there from Axios, and this guy Tom Thompson was there, right? So I didn't know them really at the time, but anyway, my buddy. They knew I wanted to be a winemaker, and I was kind of studying for it, and all that. So, and they knew I wanted to make some wine. So my buddy was like, hey man, and I just overheard that old guy over there has a vineyard. You should go ask him if you can get some fruit from him that he may not want from his backyard vineyard or whatever. And I kind of hesitated at first, but then ultimately just kind of gathered my courage and was like, screw it, let's just, well, all I can really do is say no. So I went and I approached him. I said, listen, I understand you have a vineyard. I'm studying to be a winemaker. I think I can come to your property. I'll be happy to hand pick any fruit you don't want, second crop or whatever. I was like, I'll pick it myself, I'll take it to my apartment in Davis and ferment it in my closet. I was like, I don't care how good or bad the fruit is. I just need to go through the process of making wine so I can learn. Mm-hmm. And he kind of like looked at me like, well, I'll be damned, kid, because I was 24 at the time. He's like, I'll tell you what, I bought that property as an investment property for the house. I'm going to rent the house out as an income property. It came with a vineyard. I have literally no clue what to do with it anyway. So he goes, right place, right time. He goes, you can have all the fruit. I don't know what to do with it. I'll give you all, the whole vineyard is yours. He goes, you don't have to do it in your closet. I have a 3-car garage. I'll buy you everything you need to make the wine with, and we'll just split it 50-50 when we bottle it. And I was like, holy shit, because that just doesn't happen, especially in Napa, right? So that was my classroom. So 2002 and 03, I made wine in this guy's garage, and it was the perfect classroom for me because there was no one over my shoulder telling me what to do and when. I had to kind of connect those theory dots I'd given myself through the self-study because I was really diligent about that. And when I had problems with the fermentation theories I needed to test, whatever, I'd put these emails together to all these different winemaking mentors I'd befriended out here in Napa. And, it was cool because like I didn't just ask for the answer. I showed them that I did the homework, right? So I was like, mm-hmm. Okay, this is my problem. This is what I've researched and learned about this particular thing. This is what I think I should do. And here's my work order to myself based on my volume. So like I did the whole thing. I was just like, can you confirm or deny? Am I on the right track here, or would you do something differently? And I think because I did the homework, I got a lot more answers, and some of the answers were actually really technical and great. But the cool thing is like knowing that the same exact question was asked to all these different people, when the answers came back, I saw that like no two answers were the same. So I was like, wow, man, if you ask 100 different winemakers how do you make wine, you can easily get 200 different answers, right? And so, I believe that winemaking is an art form that's supported by science, not the other way around. Science has always been there. Obviously, it's nature. But so that was the coolest learning experience for me. I think was just going through the motions there in the garage and making my mistakes and then fixing the mistakes that I made. And people ask, how was the wine? Well, the wine sucked. It was terrible. It wasn't good at all. The vineyard sucked. It was terrible. It wasn't a great vineyard, and that was a good thing. It's like you're not going to learn anything if the wine so easily just makes itself. If you're fermenting Tokalan fruit your first go, it's like, okay, well, that sure was easy. Well, yeah, of course it was easy. Half the work is done, right? But like, mess around and learn on crappy fruit, so that you can go through see the problems that can arise, and it kind of forces your hand in having to deal with it, If those problems never came up, you'd never get that experience or practice. So it was great.
So you kind of you had access both through your profession at the restaurant, because a lot of them came and dined at your restaurant, but also just being in the Valley in general. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't realize just how friendly and collaborative even very renowned individuals in Napa Valley are. There's this perception that they're rock stars and that can't be touched.
Right.
It's quite the opposite. They're more than willing to lend the proverbial hand. Is that correct?
Absolutely, 100%. I make a wine called Antithesis, which literally invented the technique of how it's made.
The conclusion of this interview can be found in the next podcast, already available for your download. Thanks again for tuning in to the official podcast of Palate Exposure, featuring Ilona Thompson.